Hey, welcome into Live Weather Impact. We're tracking storms, which is, I'm saying that kind of shockingly. We knew we'd see some, but It's been a while. I mean, it's been a while since we've seen rain, period, but also a while since we've seen actual thunderstorms, because the last time it actually rained was in early August. But if you remember back then, those weren't thunderstorms. That was kind of a cold, chilly, steady rain, what we call stratiform rain. So tonight we're actually tracking some thunderstorms, and let's get right to the radar, because a couple things have happened. We had a couple warnings, but these storms are weakening. And just look at the radar. You can actually see them kind of weakening as we stare at them, and they're not really moving south. The areas being impacted have been primarily along and just south of Interstate 40 in the last hour. So northern Cleveland County, we'll do a quick tour here. I'll kind of give you a couple areas to watch. Northern Cleveland County, moving into Lincoln County, right around Lincolnton, then heading towards Lake Norman. That's where we've seen a lot of action. We actually had a warning briefly for the southern part of Lake Norman, had some pea-sized hail in places like Westport, over towards Sherrills Ford, and now Cornelius, and not quite into Huntersville, but you're probably hearing some thunder. Mooresville, you're definitely getting rain. And then northern Cabarrus County, Kannapolis, up towards China Grove, Rockwell, all the way to Salisbury. And let me kind of zoom this out, and I'll loop this a couple of times, and you kind of get the idea on where these are and are not going. They're really not in a big hurry to go anywhere, but we might see additional storms this evening. Now let's look at the tower cams. I always like looking to see what it actually looks like out there. Our first stop is going to be pretty interesting low cloud there over in Dallas. That's looking almost due north. So that's looking at the storm that is just north of our Dallas camera, which is that's kind of looking into Lincoln County. So if you kind of know where 321 is, this is looking almost due north on 321. Towards the northern sections of Gaston County into parts of Lincoln County. Now, that's a cool view. Kind of shows a low-hanging cloud there. Looks like a little bit of a shelf cloud. Kind of keep an eye on that. The other view I love is our camera here at the Billy Graham Studios, WCNC. You kind of see the tops of the buildings at the bottom, but more impressively are those dark clouds off to the north. So those are the storms that we're watching to the north. So we'll keep an eye on both of these cameras because they do show the line, and it kind of really shows you because both of these are looking north. So what's interesting about this camera, we'll kind of keep an eye on this. Every time you see a low cloud, I think people immediately go, uh-oh, what is that? Well, low clouds are fine. If they're rotating, that's a problem. So low clouds in and of themselves aren't bad, but that's sometimes we refer those to SLCs, scary looking clouds. And that's really just sometimes all they are. If they're not rotating violently or counterclockwise. Up and down motion, yeah, that's normal. All thunderstorms have it. So, but when you see low clouds, sometimes that people immediately goes, possible tornado. There's no rotation showing up in that. But we can check the radar. We'll go back to the radar here. And the storm we're kind of looking at, that's a view from Dallas. Here's a view of the same storm. So you see Dallas on your screen there, High Shoals, Lincoln area. So that's kind of the storm we're looking at. What we'll do is we'll look at the velocity data from the terminal Doppler radar, and if you look, there's no rotation there. That's another. So you got visual proof, and then you've got the look of the radar, and on both radar views at the velocity data, you don't see any rotation. So that kind of confirms what we're seeing. But it is a cool looking cloud. We'll widen this back out. Where are these storms possibly going? They could drift a little south, but for the most part, they're going almost due east at about 15 to 20 miles per hour. But you might see that little green line that's coming south towards Gastonia and Charlotte. That's one of those outflow boundaries. That's a rush of cool air, kind of like a mini cool front. That could possibly kick off new storms. So if we're going to see storms, I would not look for those ones to the north to move towards Charlotte, Gastonia, Kings Mountain, Union County. It'd be more likely that we'd see new development in the I-85 corridor. So keep an eye on that. And over the next hour or so, that would be the time frame we're probably going to see that. We're coming up here on 6:35, so 7, 8 o'clock. And when you look at our forecast, you kind of see that 7 to 9 and 9 p.m. There's kind of like a 40% chance. That's probably pretty straight on with what's going to happen when you think about where these storms are right now. Let's look at the futurecast. I'm going to look at the futurecast first here before we get to the drought monitor, because I did want to show you something with the drought monitor. Just to show you that we do need the rain. And if you have a lawn or garden, I don't need to tell you that. But you see our futurecast kind of shows that little cluster where it is right now. We'll go through the evening hours. Kind of falls apart by 10 o'clock. We're not anticipating much being around. Tomorrow is going to be a hot one. Temperatures back up in the low 90s. So it's going to be toasty tomorrow. And just a stray shower or thunderstorm, you see the chances are pretty minimal right now. Saturday today, to me, is going to be the day to watch because we'll be in the low 90s, southwest wind, and look what happens around 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We see probably some significant scattered storms developing, maybe the most widespread we've seen, and that kind of develops into a line by dinner time. That's the actual cold front pushing through, and eventually it will move through, and by Sunday, we'll see some cooler air moving. Now, I mentioned, we need the rain. Every Thursday when we're talking about drought conditions, we get the drought monitor update. We haven't shown it in a while because since that rain in early August, we had no drought. But now, for the first time in about a month, we've got about 32% of North Carolina showing abnormally dry conditions. Now, this is the kind of the precipice of being in drought. So level 0 out of like 5. The next level will be 1, which is moderate. So you go straight to moderate. So I always hate to say we're not in drought because we go from dry to moderate. So there's like not a low end drought. This is kind of technically the low end drought. But you can see the mountains and then areas of the southern Piedmont and into areas of eastern North Carolina and areas over towards the Sandhills. So it's been dry. It really has been. And so we could use some rain. Don't expect everybody to get rain tonight. I do expect temperatures will fall down into the 60s. Tomorrow, we're in the 80s right now, by the way. We should see a pretty warm start to the day and temperatures climbing up into the low 90s, just a 20% chance of a stray shower or thunderstorm. Now, if we see a strong storm, as we've seen today, wind and hail, they're low risks, but they're there. Not going to discount that risk. The overall risk is incredibly low, and it's been exactly where we've had storms today, north and west of I-85, and really north of 40. Tomorrow there'll be storms over in Tennessee again. We'll be watching them from a distance. And then on Saturday, Tim will probably talk a little bit about this. We could see some stronger storms up towards the Virginia area, and that's with the cold front. So here's the future cast again, just to kind of go through it just for timing, because once is never enough when you're looking at the future cast. Tomorrow looks fine. Start of Saturday afternoon, that's when we're probably going to see storms. And then going into Sunday, looks like we're going to see some cooler weather. I'm going to talk with Tim about the tropics, so I won't get into that right now. We've got plenty of time to talk about that. But let's look at the weekend forecast. If you got big plans this weekend, it's like the first, I don't know, what we call this, the first weekend of autumn, really, when you think about it, because it's post-Labor Day, and now we're technically in autumn meteorologically. 90 on Saturday. Super toasty. By the way, tomorrow will be in the low 90s. Did I skip over tomorrow's forecast? I think I did. I think I showed it quickly, but let me just show you tomorrow's forecast just to show you 2 days in a row of 90s. Tomorrow we will be in the low 90s, so probably the hottest day that we've seen since mid-August, the 17th of August. I think we were 94, so it's been a while. So that's why 2 days of 90s are going to feel pretty hot to us because we've been spoiled with this early taste of autumn. But here's the good news. By Sunday, we're right back into the upper 70s. And for next week, we'll show you next week looks really good on your 7-day forecast. Upper 70s, low 80s. Even the warm-up next week isn't a crazy warm-up. We're looking at some mid-80s and then back in the low 80s by next weekend. So that's kind of more typical for early to mid-September, which by next week, mid-September, peak of the hurricane season is Wednesday, September 10th. So we'll be talking a lot about that with Tim coming up. We'll talk about the rain that's going on, the drought monitor. We've got a lot to talk about. We actually have some weather to discuss out there, and we'll get in that coming up in 2 minutes right after this break. All right, welcome back. Tim Buckley joins us as he always does here during Live Weather Impact. And Tim, first time in a long time we've had some rain to talk about, and not only rain but thunderstorms. I think it not only has it been a long time since we've had rain, it's been a long time since we've actually had thunderstorms, because most of the rain we got back in August in the first half was stratiform rain. It was kind of coolish, steady rain. It wasn't the thunderstorm or convective type that we have out there today.
Yeah, it's true, Brad. It turns out all we needed to do to get rid of our dry stretch was to just talk about it, I guess. So now that's kind of ended. We've got some rain out here, but it's a good point you bring up about the thunder and the lightning. We think about it so often in the summertime as almost being a daily occurrence. We haven't dealt with that in a couple of weeks. I had to actually dust off a couple of graphics to put into the show. I haven't shown an SPC outlook in a long time.
Yes.
And today we had a level 1 risk, as we still do technically, kind of going down from my area. But in any case, there were some storms that actually were a little potent for a little bit.
Yeah, they kind of a more typical summer setup today. They were pulse type storms. They got severe pretty quickly, but oftentimes when these pulse storms happen, they collapse on themselves and they kind of fall apart, and then new storms form on their outflow. And we saw some of that today. Have you gotten any LSR damage reports up there? We had some pea-sized hail, but I haven't seen any damage reports in our area outside of the mountains. That was the only location I saw some wind damage reports. I'm kind of curious if you guys had anything come in.
For the most part, and I'll pull this up on my computer if Jeb wants to take it, but we've mostly been non-severe.
Gotcha.
We had several warnings that popped up throughout the afternoon in our counties that are covered by the Weather Service up in Blacksburg. They did report a couple of different ones. So just to familiarize yourself with the geography, here's Boone over here. This is Greensboro, Charlotte down at the bottom. So we're talking about up in Wilkesboro and Mount Airy and these areas. You had a couple spots that had the run-of-the-mill down tree, a couple spots getting some roads blocked. Not very many power outages, and Brad, I don't know about you, but that's kind of my go-to is I'll look at the power map first, and then I'll look and see if there are any sort of damage reports that come from that. But we've mainly gotten through the day with fewer than 1,000 power outages, so it's really not been a big problem overall. It's mostly just been kind of a nuisance, and good to see some rainfall. And I know in your area right now you're still actually dealing with some thunderstorms. We've gotten cooler, and so it's gotten down to more of just some steady rain.
Yeah, what's interesting, the storms haven't really been drifting south. They've been kind of going east, but what's been happening is the outflow has been drifting south, and that's producing new storms. And so I think what's going to happen for us is we made it into the mid and upper 80s across the southern Piedmont into the upstate, so it was pretty toasty down here today. There's still some fuel for these storms, but the sun's setting earlier and earlier. I actually had to look now. 7:46 is our sunset tonight, so that's just about an hour away. So we probably got another hour and a half of some good heat left for these storms. So if they don't produce something here shortly, we might be out of luck. And that leads me to the next part of what we wanted to talk about, Tim, was on Thursdays we get the drought monitor, and we did talk about how dry it's getting. And sure enough, the drought monitor comes out today, and it was 30-some% of North Carolina now abnormally dry. That's a pretty big jump because it was 0 last week.
Yeah, and it's always noteworthy when you can get the state to 0. We were 0 for quite a while. I don't think I looked up how long we were at 0, but it feels like it's been at least a month.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's been a solid 4 weeks. So, that was kind of nice to see that.
And that's pretty good.
Yeah. It was after that second week of rain, so pretty much like this time in early August, because as you know, the data goes Tuesday to Tuesday, even though it comes out on Thursday. So that first batch of rain doesn't really go into the data until the following week sometimes. And it took that second week. But it's really interesting to see where the drought has been the worst. And I actually looked at the rainfall deficits. It lines up pretty well. Some parts of eastern North Carolina have 4 or 5 inch rainfall deficits in just the llast 14 days, which seems pretty high, but it also tells you that it's usually pretty wet on the coast because it's usually tropics going on right now. So, kind of curious, have you seen any signs of drought? I'm a homeowner, obviously the lawn looks brown, but I haven't seen the trees or anything else show stress yet.
Yeah, so around here, and I was wondering if we would maybe get dropped into that category too, Brad, considering we just had a couple weeks dry in Greensboro. But that's been super localized. It hasn't been that widespread. The main signs we've been noticing, people sending me a couple pictures of the ground getting cracked, the mud drying up, those types of things. But also, we had a summer where the grass has been green the whole time until now. So now you're starting to see those brown patches, and you've explained this before in a pretty good way, but you can have a long-term drought, and then you can have kind of what's called a flash drought.
Yep.
And I think this is maybe more in that second category where you're drying out the tops of the soils overall, but the big problems are still a ways away.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't obviously going to be a sustained drought. And it's also we're getting close to harvest season, so I always worry about this time of year, because a lot of crops are finishing up their growing for the year, and harvest season, you don't want to see it get drought right now because this could really ruin some of the crops. But in some cases, a lot of farmers don't want it super wet either because that makes it hard to get in the fields and harvest a lot of their crops for the summer. So, yeah, it's always that. I tell you what, we have a tough job, Tim, but think about farmers, how reliant they are on weather, and they're just at the whims of whatever Mother Nature throws at them. That is a stressful profession to be in.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like you were saying, it's got to be that Goldilocks weather. It's got to be not too wet, not too dry, like right in the middle, not too hot, not too cold. There's so many things that can go wrong. And, we did so many stories with farmers earlier in the summertime with all the flooding. They were telling us, give us the heat, give us the drought. We can water. We can water the plants. We can't deal with, when they're just rotting in that standing water. So that was a bit of a problem earlier. And like you said, if it's not one thing, it can be the other. So it is difficult. It's difficult to farm. Yeah,
so
anywhere.
Let's talk a little bit about the risk of severe storms. We were in the level 1 today, kind of the lowest of low, and it basically kind of verified. It's considered marginal. I know it's a weird word. People probably don't really grasp that, but it's the lowest level. Tomorrow, there's actually a kind of what we would be a level 2 or medium risk over in Tennessee and Kentucky with this front. And then it looks like, Tim, and I mentioned this in my forecast because it's really going to be towards you, you guys are in another low risk for Saturday with the front, which it's preliminary. I wouldn't be surprised to see that expanded along the entire front as it pushes in because it looks like there could be probably a more widespread risk for our area coming up Saturday because that's a legit cold front coming in.
It's a big cold front, and, I wouldn't be surprised to see that expanded either, Brad, especially for the Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening. You're going to have a lot of heat out there. It's going to be in the 90s in your area, probably close to 90 up here. Lots of humidity, high dew points, and a big temperature contrast on that front. So there are ingredients at play. I know, like, if we get into the weeds, maybe the lapse rates aren't quite as good, or the cooling with height that you'd like to see. But it's something, and there's a lot going on. It's a fall weekend Saturday. You've got football games, festivals, whatever. This is going to be an impact to your life that you'd want to pay attention to, especially like 3 p.m. to 8 p.m., I would say.
And Jeb, what time is that UNC Charlotte game? Is that a 3 o'clock game?
I thought it was later. Let me look
it later? Because I know the App State game is at 3:30. So, we have two big games.
Yeah, it's going to be at 7.
So, so that could be interesting for them, especially because around that tailgate time, early kickoff, there might be some lightning in the area still. And the NCAA, huge props to them. There's a lot of things we can criticize the NCAA on. They have a very straightforward and strict lightning policy for all of their activities. The good 8-mile radius, 30-minute rule. And you see this seems like every fall, Tim, and especially in the South, where we get these long lightning delays at some of these college football games because the clock resets. Every time there's a lightning strike within 8 miles of the stadium, they set the clock at 30 minutes, and they got to wait 30 minutes until there's no more strikes within 8 miles. And it seems like the early season games, there's always some crazy game that you realize is still going on that started at like 3 o'clock, and it's like 10 o'clock at night, and it's still going on because they had lightning delays for like hours.
It's true. Over the weekend, I think it was at Texas Tech, they had a huge supercell that blew through, big shelf cloud and everything. So that was the latest one. We'll probably have some sort of delay in the South, whether it's in the Carolinas or Virginia this weekend. I was a part of one of those last year, opening weekend. I went to see Penn State play at West Virginia, and we had like a 2.5-hour halftime. Ooh. It timed out perfectly right at the halftime. Yeah. But boy, oh boy, you were in that concourse. a long, long time.
Yeah.
It takes a while to get rid of those storms, you know?
Yeah, because they're usually this time of year, they're not in a big hurry to move. They're just going to be camping out. And
No.
I feel like it's always a lightning delay or there's some tropical system that postpones a game somewhere in the southeast this time of year. And speaking of that, Tim, we got to talk about the tropics. I thought you had a really good post on Facebook because as we know that the misinformation campaign has already started in earnest on our next tropical wave with long-range deterministic modeling. But we've talked about this, I feel, for a couple days now, that we are all very confident we're probably going to have Gabrielle form at some point in the next 3 or 4 days. But let's be honest, Tim, this is still 7 days away from the Caribbean. So this is not going to sneak up on us. And beyond there, I mean, there is some uncertainty on whether it stays south or recurves. But right now, there's no immediate threat to the United States, at least for 10 days.
Yeah, and it's that type of thing, Brad, where, I've said before, I think, we have the technology to be able to see these things as far as could possibly be. We know this. We've already known about this for days, that this is probably going to form. We don't have the technology yet to tell you where it's going to go 12 days from now. So we have the earliest warning that something could happen, but we don't have that enough specific information to let you know whether you should worry about it. So at this point, what's the use in worrying? Be aware, check back every couple of days, see what the update is. We'll let you know. It's not going to sneak up on you. That's for sure. But if anything, any impact would be late next week into next weekend. I'm right about 12 days from now or so. That's a long time. And a lot can change. It always changes either in a good way or sometimes in a bad way. And we just don't know right now. So I wouldn't worry too much.
Yeah, probably a week from today, Tim, we'll be I won't be here. I'll be back on Thursday. Yeah, I'm going to go into the NWA conference tomorrow, but I will be back next Thursday. So probably a week from today, we'll be sitting here having a good idea on whether this is any impact at all. And what's interesting about system this far out, and something to watch, if people, I know some folks just want to not worry about it. Other folks are, they're weather enthusiasts like we are. They love weather. Something to watch for is if this is a stronger system, if it develops rapidly and gets to a hurricane quickly, it's more likely going to recurve, Tim. If it stays weaker longer, it would stay further south. So it actually has a huge impact on the future track. And so if there's one thing we'll watch is just how quickly this comes together. And if it gets really strong quickly, then it's going to probably recurve. But if it stays weaker, then it probably is going to stay more south and west for a longer period of time. And it is an invest area now, and I hate to even show, but we do have a few spaghetti plots. Tim, I think you have them pulled up, which I love. So we're starting to get some of the first model runs right now. And Invest 91 is the investigation area. And just FYI, sometimes we throw that term out there, Tim, and I don't think we explain it enough. But when we put an invest on it, it means we can run model data on it. And we run through in the Atlantic, we use that L. That means Atlantic Basin. And we start at 90 and we go to 95, I think. And then we just rotate through those numbers. So, so there's another invest out there, it becomes 92L. And so that's what that number comes from. So for people asking, what does that mean? Investigation area, 91L. That's just the number we give it.
It's something that was never meant to be put on a forecast banner, but here we are. It's definitely, it's like a pre-storm, basically.
Yes. It's funny. I think its origins are actually with the Navy, because the Navy wanted to look at possible tropical systems, so they came up with this naming, and it just stuck with the. It's one of those inside baseball things that, like you said, really wasn't meant for public consumption, but now we all get to see it.
Yeah, but like you said, I think the important things that we'll watch the next couple of days, number one, when does it form and where does it form? Sometimes that first center can be a little surprising to kind of where it pops up. If even a little jog to the south or a jog to the north, that can have some pretty long-term implications to where it goes. And then, like you said, how strong it gets, how quickly, that'll determine how easily it is to steer it. And then beyond that, then we'd want to watch more about all the pretty complicated upper level pattern. Where's the trough setting up? How strong is the ridge? There are some things going on there. I saw one of the models had an upper level low in the southeast. That's not always something we want to see. So we'll keep an eye out, I think, right? Not stressing yet, but we'll watch later if need be. I usually start to get worried if it enters the Caribbean and is already heading in that northwestern direction, like if it were passing between Puerto Rico and the Dominican or something. That tends to be when we want to be a little bit more on alert.
Yeah, you start to see that kind of northwest jaunt right when it gets down there. And by the way, that's the warmest water in the Atlantic Basin into the Gulf. So that's actually the further north it goes, it's marginal. Aaron still has a lot of upwelling from Aaron to the north, so much more favorable environment
that's
down
true.
to the south. But yeah, one of the things, looking at the super ensemble there, you see the spread. That's the model guidance telling you there's a lot of uncertainty because the fact that you have so many north and south, that's the models telling us, hey, we don't know yet. There's still a lot of uncertainty and a wide range of possibilities. And the fact that we have some near South America and then one east of Bermuda should tell you that's a pretty big spread, even for this early on.
Right. This means don't cancel your beach trip if you have one for 2 weeks from now. But also keep paying attention because there is some threat in the Atlantic, and we want to make sure we know where it's going, and we'll certainly keep you posted. But all of this is normal. Hurricane season is normal.
Yeah.
The Carolinas are always having some threats in hurricane season, and this probably, we don't even know if it's a threat for us yet, but it won't be the last one that we wonder about. There will be a couple more, I'm sure, too.
No, and who knows, by this time next week, we might have another system to worry about. You don't know. And next Wednesday, Tim, what's the date? September 10th. It's the peak day of the hurricane season.
Yeah.
So you need to be paying attention. This time of year is like monitoring the forecast every couple of days. Obviously, we'll be tracking it more going into tomorrow, and we'll talk more about the storms probably that we have over the weekend. But that's all the time we have for this evening. Stay tuned for more impact news coming up.